Today on 10-Minute IT Jams, we're joined by George Saab, who's the Vice President of Development for Java Platform at Oracle and the Chair of the OpenJDK Governing Board. With Java recently going through a significant overhaul with the release of Java 18, George joins us today to discuss how the technology can help businesses thrive. Thanks for coming along, George, and welcome to the Jam.
Sure thing. Happy to be with you today.
Fantastic. So just to start off with a kind of generalized question, can you name some of the companies that use Java?
Wow, it's probably easier to name the companies that don't because there are so few. Java is really broadly used throughout the industry today. It's used by just about any organization you care to name in telecoms, in finance, in the cloud, on desktops, on servers. It's really kind of everywhere. There are even all kinds of form factors for Java. One of the sort of lesser known things is that there's even a form factor that's on a SIM card, and it's actually in many SIM cards in the form of Java card. So pretty interesting, and that's how we get to those amazingly, large numbers of billions of devices that Java runs on.
Fantastic. And expanding on recent developments, what are the most recent improvements and innovations that you guys have been working on?
Yeah, so we've recently moved into a new way of releasing Java. So rather than these big bang releases that take multiple years and are sort of less predictable in terms of when they're going to arrive, we've moved to a more time-based approach. So basically, we have a major release every 6 months, like clockwork. And then what is a little bit more fungible is what goes into those. So we only put features in as they are done and ready and fully specified, fully tested. We'll sometimes put them in as a preview so that we can get a lot of feedback from developers from real world scenarios. But in order to figure out what the content is that's going into those releases, we haven't sort of magically found a way of doing 3 years of work in 6 months. So instead, what we do is we have these longer ranging projects looking at particular areas where we think Java can improve or be stronger. And so just to give you an idea of some of those, there's Project Amber, which is reducing boilerplate in the Java language and improving the syntax. We have Project Loom, which is working on scalability, basically taking Java to the next level. It already has a great reputation for scalability, but we want to take it even further. We have things like Project Valhalla, which is basically looking at ways of redoing the way that Java lays out data in memory. So if you're willing to give up a certain amount of flexibility that objects give you, you can have something that performs more like Java primitives and takes advantage of advances in hardware. Those are just a few. We have a number of other projects that are going on, and those are delivering smaller increments of change into each of these 6-month release.
For sure. And how do these improvements help developers and the businesses that they work for?
Yeah, well, we really are kind of focused on both ends of that. So when you look at something like Project Amber that I mentioned, that's mostly about improving the syntax and making a delight for developers to write Java, making it easier and simpler, reducing the amount of boilerplate and overhead that they have, while at the same time preserving Java's value as something where when you look at a bit of Java code, you understand what it means. It's not some weird thing depending on macros here or there. It's basically something that has a well-defined meaning. On the other hand, we also do things to improve the runtime aspects. So just to give you an example, in Java 18, there were a huge number of improvements to the default garbage collector and to the garbage collector that's for low latency, basically making it so that just by moving to 18, you get, for most workloads, a lot better performance and lower latency from the garbage collector in terms of your runtime. Other things that we work on are things like making observability, monitoring, and management better. And so that's always been something that Java's been pretty strong at. But we've been adding things in, new capabilities that make that possible, like additions and improvements to the Java flight recorder, which is exactly as it sounds, something that it can be always on recording what's going on and allow you to figure out and analyze what has been happening in your running JVM.
Yeah, and just kind of touching on developer productivity again, can you just expand on how Java 18 improves that developer productivity?
Sure. Well, there are a couple of neat things that we've done there. We think in terms of what is happening in the Java virtual machine. We think in terms of what's happening in the Java language, and we think in terms of things in the libraries. So, just as an example, we have some ongoing improvements that have been happening in the library from something called Project Panama, which is about basically interaction between Java and native code. Allowing you to take advantage of optimizations at the lower hardware level and adding in this case, in 18, something called the vector API. Now that's actually gone through a couple of revisions. It's now in the third incubator in 18, and we think it's on its way to becoming final. Just to give you, let me give you another example. So a long-running improvement that we've seen coming in from Amber has been working on adding the capability to do pattern matching in Java in a way that feels natural. So that is something that happened earlier for instance of, and in 18 it's been added as a second round of preview for switch statements. Now, what does that mean? Why is that important? Well, because basically we're adding over time the capability for programmers who write in Java to not only take advantage of Java strength and object orientation, but to sort of merge that with functional programming, but in a way that feels easy and natural. And so this is something where for all people who've been interested in functional programming, pattern matching turns out to be a very, very compelling and natural way to break down and solve certain kinds of problems. And so we're happy that this is something that is spreading throughout the Java language gradually. But again, importantly, not as something that feels bolted on the side, but something that just feels like a normal first-class citizen in Java syntax.
For sure. And how has adoption of cloud technologies impacted Java?
Yeah, so Java is used all over the place in the cloud. I think certainly my colleagues in Oracle Cloud talk about what a great place Oracle Cloud is to run Java workloads. And I think when you look across at all of the major cloud providers, they're basically falling all over themselves in order to tell you what how great they are as an environment for running Java. At the same time, we see there are a lot of articles that are talking about this language or that language and how great it is for the cloud. Certainly, we want Java to work well in the cloud, and we want clouds to be great places to run Java. It's kind of a natural extension for what people did in the past. They would run their own data centers. Now, instead of running their own data center, they're basically running workloads in the cloud. And so Java turns out to be a technology that people turn to for that, but it's just kind of unsurprising. Now, early on, there were a couple of challenges there. There were some places where, for instance, low-level calls made by Java use the things that were natural in server-based Linux systems, and with some cloud technology and especially container technology, some of the appropriate native calls to make in order to do things like figure out how many resources were available to your running program, changed. And so we quickly fixed that, quickly backported that through all versions. But sometimes people still talk about that as something that's a challenge. We think going forward, Java is a great technology to use in the cloud, and that's certainly what we hear from our users.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, George, and we look forward to hearing more about Java in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.